Delight Your Marriage, episode 28.
Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hey, it's Belah. I want to just thank you for tuning in today. No matter where you are or what you're in the middle of, maybe you're washing dishes or in the car heading to work or on your lunch break, I just thank you so much for letting me and Julie into your ears today. She's got some really awesome insights to share, and I believe that it's really going to be a blessing for you. So I want to go ahead and dive in and let you hear the rest of this awesome interview. I want to move to how things are in your marriage now with Randy. I know we talked a little bit about some struggles and some past things, but what does it look like now between the two of you?
We're in a good place right now. I would think what it looks like now is that we very much feel like we're on the same page. I would say that we definitely feel like we're on the same page, and we're not afraid to express our frustration about anything that still does come up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not being afraid to express it is really good. It's just brilliant. And I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, but I want to go back to something you said a little earlier about how you interact with your ex-husband quite a bit now. And it's something that I think a lot of women that especially have had sexual experience prior to marriage, how do you keep your mind in check even when you're around a person that you have had intimate experience with? Does that make sense?
It does. I think for me, it's not that huge of a challenge, just mostly because, my current husband and I, Randy and I, have been married 12 years. So we've been married longer than my first husband and I were married. And I just feel like Randy and I have done so much life together that sometimes, it feels like when I look back on that life with my ex-husband, that was just like a whole, it's hard to realize, that was part of my journey at times.
Wow.
But
awesome.
It's not hard for me to keep that all in check. I think he and I both have pretty much moved on from that time in our life. I have realized, and maybe it's just I'm more at peace with this, I have realized that some of the pain of my divorce and the scars of that are never going to completely go away. And I know for some people that makes them very uncomfortable, but it doesn't really for me. I just am more at peace with the pain that's always going to be a part of me to a degree. And as far as the intimacy, it's probably at times harder for Randy than it is for me. And he does sometimes say that. He's like, gosh, I remember one time he heard Eric and I talking about a dog that we had, and it wasn't a bad conversation. We were just talking and, oh yeah, remember this and all that. And he even said to me, Randy said to me later, he said, yeah, he's like, sometimes I forget that you had this whole other life, like you had this whole, like this was a man you had sex with and you had a baby with. And so sometimes I think it's harder for Randy. And at times, honestly, the parenting together has been, that's not always easy, trying to have to coordinate parenting. Mitch spends a couple nights a week at his dad's house, and so stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for being so open about that, because I think a couple things we can pull out of that is for someone that has had the same experience, maybe a divorce, maybe promiscuity before marriage, it can get to a place where you don't even think about it anymore. You don't even realize it happened, like you said. And I think that's really gives a lot of hope for people that are kind of in the midst of feeling really bad and having struggles in these areas. It can get to a place where, yes, the pain is still part of those scars are still there, but you have a peace about it, which is really wonderful. The other thing I wanted to just pull out is that you and Randy have such an open communication that he's willing to share with you what happened, what happened to his heart when you talked about this dog with your ex.
We really, I don't know. I mean, I think Randy and I are just really open. And here's the thing is he realizes, I mean, he has me. I mean, I think Randy kind of feels like, Eric doesn't have me anymore. I'm Randy's wife now. And so even though at times it's awkward for him, or the parenting together issue when we're parenting with my ex-husband, that's a hard thing. He is real honest. I mean, he is real open. And we realize too, honestly, Belah, this kind of gives us good perspective too, is my older son is 16, almost 17 years old. He is a sophomore in high school. This is not somebody that, Eric, my ex-husband, is not someone we're going to have to be doing a lot of day-to-day parenting with for very much longer.
Very
So
cool.
once my son is raised, I mean, it's not that we won't see Eric. I mean, we realize we'll still see Eric at times or have to communicate with him even once Mitch goes to college. But honestly, for the most part, we know that it's a limited amount of more time that we have to parent with him. So that helps us too.
Yes,
we're
that's
through
wonderful.
we're through the bulk of our parenting. When Randy and I got married, my son was almost 5. So we still had a lot of parenting ahead of us with my ex-husband, and we don't really anymore. And now our older son, I mean, he's driving and he's got his own life. And truth be told, he just as soon be with his friends than with any of his parents. So
much less both sets.
Yeah, he's a typical teenager, and he's doing his own thing, and he doesn't need so much of the day-to-day parenting that we used to have to coordinate with, that Eric and I used to have to spend a lot of time coordinating with getting him to and from school and all that stuff. So yeah, we see a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Well, and that's cool, because I think there's a lot of co-parenting families out there that may be listening that need to hear that. They need to hear that it's not going to be forever. And, and it is a certain time where you do have to, do the hard work of communicating about things that, are uncomfortable and you wish you just, never have to talk about again. But the cool thing is it's not going to be a forever kind of interaction, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I want to ask a little bit about getting to the level of that openness that you have with Randy. I'm sure it was not an easy road in terms of, talking about past experiences. And I say that kind of with, my husband and I have struggled with that area as well sometimes, where something will be brought up and he'll just notice that came from my past marriage. And, how have you guys gotten to a place where he's willing to share with you the pain, and at the same time, you aren't okay, you're okay with going there because there's a good thing at the end of it? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I mean, like, I would go back to the thing of practice, being vulnerable with each other. It takes practice. And have we tripped at times on that? Have we not always been graceful in the ways we've expressed what's making us feel sad or hurt or angry? Well, sure, because we're human. But for the most part, I think the more we get good about practicing being real with each other and transparent with each other, I just think the better off, the easier it comes. The more reassured you are that it's safe, that you're safe with this person. Does that make sense?
Yep. And I want to ask you, if you can, kind of dumb it down to the 3 chief things you think have been central to your marital success. And you might have touched on them already, but kind of clarifying those.
So I would say, obviously friendship is a key thing, sexual intimacy, nurtured sexual intimacy. And then the third thing I would say, healthy patterns are intentional. We talked about that before, but that just, too many people think that they can get around to their nurturing their marriage someday, the elusive someday, we'll take care of this. And that just doesn't really work. You have to be intentional about building those healthy patterns now, even if that doesn't look perfect, and even if it looks cumbersome, and even if you kind of have a few near misses, that sort of thing, the more you walk in the direction of health, the better off you'll be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I want to circle back to the sex part that you mentioned.
Okay.
I love the part that you said, basically if mommy and daddy aren't in sync, the whole relationship is not in sync.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sex is just a huge part of, sex. I always tell people sex is never just about sex. It really, as much as our society makes it out to be that way, or the hookup culture, or friends with benefits, or whatever, but sex is never just about sex, and God designed it that way, which is why when it's nurtured within a marriage, it's such a profound thing. And it's not just about what happens in those moments when you're making love, but it's also about the residual effects of that, and how it equips you to feel more connected, and how it relieves stress, and how it helps you extend grace to each other and realize that you're on the same page, that sort of thing. So that's, I guess, one thing I would add about that.
Can I ask how, someone might be listening to this and they hear you've got a blog, you've got a website, not just a website, you've got a book, you just are a bona fide expert in this area. I mean,
oh, you're sweet.
Only Randy knows.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's easy to maybe look at your, what you bring to the table or bring to the bedroom, and and kind of think, well, she's got it all figured out. How am I, as someone who doesn't have all that understanding and that wisdom about sex, how can I have a fulfilling sex life? And what would you say to that person that's just feeling insecure about that?
Well, I think sexual insecurities, or performance insecurities, or will I know how to do stuff right, or will I know how to turn him on, that sort of thing, I think those are very normal. And for women, the other big thing that usually gets in there is they feel self-conscious about their body. Women much more than men struggle with body image issues. But all the research kind of shows us that in general, husbands want their wife. We sometimes as women think that the husband has this idealized supermodel idea about what sex should be, which really, if you poll most husbands, what they want is they want the woman they married, and the woman that they do life with, and the woman they have babies with. And, they want the person that they're committed to, and they want that person to want to be there. And so I think a key thing in kind of building some of that sexual confidence. And even though obviously I was married before and had sex before, is I hadn't had sex with Randy before. I had to learn what he enjoyed and what turned him on. And I truly think that when we come to bed with an enthusiasm and a willingness to learn, and a willingness to be vulnerable, I think that that's just so hot. I really do. I think that most husbands think that too. And truth be told, I think husbands feel some insecurities. I mean, as far as like how they're doing and what they should do to make it a good experience for her. And I always tell women, don't put that on him to assume that he knows what he's doing, because a woman's body is just, oh my God, let's face it. I mean, like on any given day, we don't even understand our bodies very well. So to think that your husband is going to know what it's going to take to turn you on, or to help you climax, or whatever, you guys need to learn some of that stuff together and help him understand what feels good. And do you need more foreplay? Do you need firmer touch? Do you need, there's just many ways that you can communicate. So I would say, don't let those insecurities stop you in your tracks, or cause you to just be totally inhibited in bed, because obviously that's not going to be a good experience for you or for your spouse. And the other thing I would say too is I'm always paying attention to the spiritual dynamics of it all. And
Mm,
here's the thing. God wants you and your husband, God wants married people enjoying their sexual intimacy.
yeah,
And the enemy, Satan, does not want that because Satan
right.
knows how powerful sex is. So if a couple enjoys their intimacy, is intentional about it, is enthusiastic about figuring out what turns each other on, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
If they enjoy that sacred, exclusive time together, well, Satan knows that that's a force to be reckoned with. He knows that
Mm,
that binds a marriage together in such a way that it's hard for him to penetrate and
right.
to cause division. So I always tell couples that God, one of the best things you can do for your marriage is make love because
Mm,
it's a God thing going on too.
yeah.
And in the exclusivity of your marriage, this is the other thing I say to women is no one knows what's going on in your bedroom. So sometimes women think, "Oh my gosh, I'm this Christian woman. I
Mm,
can't get all wild and crazy in bed, or I
mm,
can't try
yeah,
to a different position or whatever." That just a good Christian
right.
woman wouldn't do that. And that is just the craziest thing. Because
Right,
here's the thing, within the exclusivity and the privacy of your marriage bed,
right,
that is just about the two of you. I mean,
right.
that's not about, the ladies at Bunko and what would they think or the,
Mm,
so i- it's really important, I think, for couples to try to be willing to ask each other, does this feel good? Does it feel good when I
mhm,
do this? Or to be proactive and say, hey, I really like it when you do such and
mm.
such. I just think that the more comfortable couples get in doing that, the better their sexual encounters are going to be.
Yeah. And something you've outlined a couple of times in the interview is how it takes practice. And I
Yeah, it
think,
does.
yeah, yeah.
That whole thing about, sometimes you'll hear people say like, oh, honeymoon, like can't wait for the honeymoon. And I gotta tell you, I think for a lot of couples, I think, especially if they didn't have sex beforehand, I think
Uh-huh.
honeymoon sex sucks, because it's like you are not even
Right.
really quite comfortable with being naked with each other. And I remember that being just kind of an odd experience for my husband and I.
Yeah.
We'd been dating and engaged and all that for a couple years by then. And I think it was very awkward for us. So I always
Yes.
say that practice, yeah, I just think some of the best sex happens after you've been married a while, after you've learned,
Yes.
what sends a person over the edge.
Yeah.
It's like, gosh, well, you're not going to know that in the first week or 2 weeks or 2 months of marriage. That's a
That's right.
learned, that's a learned thing for sure.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Well, I mean, we've talked about it quite a bit already, but if you could give one specific tip that maybe a wife could implement in her marriage tonight, what would you tell her about sex?
What would I tell her about sex? Gosh, I have to narrow it down to one. I would say the don't underestimate uh, your sexual power in a good way. Don't
Mm,
underestimate your sexual power in a good way. Some
hmm
women use their sexual power to manipulate or
mm,
to bargain or to
yeah. It's not
hold it
good.
over his head, like he'll get
Mm,
sex when he does this for me, or I'll
oh,
reward him
yeah.
this way, or I'll punish him this way. He didn't
So
do
not
such
good.
and such, and so I'm going to withhold that sort of thing. But I would encourage the optimist in me and the positive
Mm,
encourager in me says, don't underestimate that you are the one with the privilege to speak love to your man in a way
yeah.
that no one else can.
Yes.
And so your sexual power is very influential over him. And so if you can learn to bless each other in this way and to be intentional in this way, I just think, it's going to do wonders for your marriage. I really do. And if that's a new thing for you, a new thing to initiate or to express to your husband, hey, I want to make love to you tonight. I
Yeah.
know it takes courage to put yourself out there, but most husbands are going to respond more than enthusiastically to that and feel grateful and feel affirmed. So yeah, don't underestimate your sexual power.
I love that. I love thinking about it as power, as this is an opportunity for you to encourage and love your man like no one else can. So good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. Now, I want to, we're almost about to wrap up. I want to ask you about something you mentioned a little earlier also, but due to the specific marriage that you've had, what opportunities you've had to serve God and get to know him?
Well, I think certainly in this area, since I've been through a failed marriage and now I'm in a healthy remarriage, I think that I have had and I'm humbled by this, but I am most encouraged when I get an email from somebody who says that something they read on my blog helped them save their marriage or helped them make a positive change in their marriage. That is like just the best affirmation ever. And then the other opportunities I've had to serve is sometimes people in my circle of influence or within the Omaha area will contact me and will say, hey, I have a friend who's getting married soon. Would you be willing to talk to her about sexual intimacy? And I love those one-on-one opportunities. And even when strangers, I had a couple from California contact me and they said, hey, we're young couple, been married, I think about 4 or 5 years. They had their first baby and they were just really struggling. And they're like, hey, would you talk with us? Would you? And they were just, it takes courage. And they did, they just reached out and I was encouraged by that and humbled by that. So yeah, I've gotten opportunities and I love it. If my blog or anything I've spoken or any thing in the book that I co-wrote, if that helps people grasp a better idea of what sex can be in their marriage, then that is sweet, sweet, heavenly reward for me. I mean, that just it affirms me greatly. So definitely.
And Julie, a question just came to mind that I think I'm going to try to, if you're comfortable answering it, I'd love to maybe insert kind of back into the interview a little bit farther back. But, well, I wanted to ask you, someone that is in, let's say, the same situation that you were in with your ex. There's a third party involved. It sounds like a horrific experience, really. What would you say to a woman that has just found out something along those lines? And would you kind of encourage her to walk a similar course, or what would you ask her to do?
You mean like if she has found out that there's a third party involved?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my situation was I found out the third party was involved after my husband left. So my situation was a little different. I think each situation is sometimes horribly unique. And I would encourage I think the first thing I would encourage, if a woman suspects that there's a third party involved, I mean, I think she should go to her husband first and ask him. I'm kind of a trust your gut person, but you have to keep that in check with not being paranoid as well. So more open communication. And then if it's a situation that like after the fact, like the husband has already decided to leave and you find out a third party is involved. I mean, I think you need safe, mature people around you so that you don't do anything rash. I'm not really big on the whole revenge thing. I just don't, I don't think it accomplishes anything. I think ultimately I hold tight to that verse in Hebrews that we all have to give an account for how we lived. Amen. And if a cheating spouse has chosen adultery, well, eventually they're going to have to give an account for that. And it's not that there's not forgiveness if they repent. And I know of marriages that have been saved that have faced adultery and and porn addiction and strip clubs and all that. I know marriages that when there's repentance and there's a willingness on both parties to heal. So I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, a person in that situation has to discern the whole, can this marriage be saved?
Yeah.
That's kind of a long-winded answer. I'm sorry. I just think each situation is so unique,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes the person committing adultery doesn't want to repent, and that's a whole different ball
Mm,
game, you know.
that's so true. Yeah. No, I just thank you for going into that a little bit, because I know that, now being on the other side of divorce and in a marriage that's just wonderfully fulfilling, thank God, I would hope, I would want women to work through it and stick it out, and work as much as they can to make it a better thing, not to kind of walk in my shoes necessarily in that way.
Yeah,
So I kind of wanted to just kind of go into that and just hear your thoughts on it. And I appreciate that so much.
you bet. Well, I appreciate that you want to talk to me about all this stuff. I mean, I just am so encouraged by people like yourself and others who are willing to put themselves out there and really try to encourage marriages, because I guarantee you there's a lot of marriages that are hungry for it, that are
That's
hungry
so
for
true.
truth and encouragement and hope to be spoken
Amen.
into their marriage.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and maybe that'll kind of move into one of the last questions I want to ask you
Okay.
is about a book or program that you'd specifically recommend, and I'd love for you to go into your book a little bit more as well.
Okay. A book or a program. Oh my gosh. Um, I think, and this isn't specifically on sex. Well, it depends.
Mhm.
I really like Shannon Etheridge's book, The Sexually Confident Wife.
Yeah.
And Shannon Etheridge was one of the first people, and Shannon and I have emailed and communicated. I mean, I really have a lot of respect for Shannon, but she was one of the first people in the Christian realm, to really say to wives, sex is a good thing in your marriage, and this is
Mm,
why.
mm,
So I still have a heart for that book, The Sexually Confident Wife. Um, Shannon's very vulnerable in it, and so I like it a lot. I also think Shanti Feldhahn has done good work with, now I'm going to forget the names of her books, the ones where what do women really think? What do men really think?
Oh, uh-huh.
What you need to know about men, what you need to know about women. I mean,
Yeah.
Shanti Feldhahn is very research based. I mean, she really has done a lot of tremendous work. So if you just search Shanti Feldhahn, it's Feldhahn. Great resource out there. And then the last resource I would recommend is, I have a lot of respect for Jay of Hot, Holy, and Humorous, her blog. Um, she and I have gotten to know each other, and she's another person who's just doing her best to live it, to live her
Yeah.
marriage and to speak truth about sex and marriage. So I really respect her. As for my book, I think my book, Pursuit of Passion, Discovering True Intimacy in Your Marriage, it's available both as ebook and audiobook. We didn't do hard copy because so much of what we're learning is that, ebook is really the way people are reading things. But
Yeah. Saves tree.
yeah, saves trees. Yeah. I'm an old soul though. I still love,
Yeah.
I don't know. I love I love books around me. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think it would be a great book. I always say, I think it would be a great book, not only for couples first starting out, so if you have a young engaged or a recently married couple, I think this book really covers a lot and helps them have those set in place, those good tapes in their head of what sex should be in marriage. And so that's one thing I would say. But I also think the book is beneficial even for somebody who's been married a while, because let's face it, one of the things, honestly, Belah, that so sabotages sexual intimacy in marriage is we come into it with all these screwed up tapes in our head about what sex is. And I think about so many, particularly Christian women, who all they heard growing up was sex was wrong, sex was gross, sex was bad, and to say no to
Yep.
sex, no, no, no. And I get why we tell teenagers that. But here's the thing, sadly, that hasn't been balanced with helping young people understand why sex in marriage is a good thing
Yep.
and why orgasm is a good thing in marriage,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I think that my book and other resources out there can help couples overcome some of those skewed and false tapes that are rolling around in their head. Another one that rolls around in a lot of women's heads is if they had sex before they were married, and if they were promiscuous or whatever. I hear from women who genuinely think they don't deserve good sexual intimacy in their marriage because they believe they are being punished for their past promiscuity. And that is a lie from the pit of hell, because it almost says that Jesus's blood can't overcome that sin. And that's just the truth. We know is God's a redemptive God. Your past does not define you. So I do think this book, another book, helps couples put in place those truth tapes rather than the false tapes.
I just so appreciate that. And, our listeners know that I really love sharing resources with them because, that's been a huge, huge help in my marriage and my sexuality. And if I didn't have specific books that I could point to and say, this helped me, so I'm so glad that you share that.
Yeah. And I do want to say one other book that I would recommend if a couple wants to do a book together, if they didn't want to do our book. I mean, obviously, I'd love it if they would do my book, but is another book, When Two Become One, Enhancing Sexual Intimacy and Marriage by Christopher and Rachel Mccluskey. The reason I like this book as well is because it's meant for a couple to go through together, and it has questions at the end of each chapter. So it's meant to be a book that really helps a couple dig in to how to make their intimacy healthy and how to overcome some of the struggles they've had. So that's another one I would recommend.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's just so good. Now, our listeners also know that you can get all of these resources at delightyourmarriage.com in the show notes. I'm going to have them all linked up, so it'll be very easy for you to.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, as well as some of the books that we didn't have the names for, so I'll have that in there. So cool. Well, now finishing up, I want to ask you kind of my final question is about if you could go back to year one of your marriage, what would you sit yourself down and say to yourself if you could?
What would I sit myself down to and say to myself? I would sit myself down and I would say, this is what I would say. I would say the extraordinary lives in the ordinary. That's what I would say. I would say the extraordinary lives in the ordinary. Be patient. Don't, you can't die on the side of every mountain. I mean, you gotta discern what battles are worth fighting. And I will say the vast majority of the little nitpicky stuff in your marriage, don't die on the sides of those mountains. It's not worth it, because if you become consumed with some of those small slights and frustrations and stuff like that, if you become consumed, you are going to miss the extraordinary in the ordinary. And so that's what I would say to a younger me 12 years ago.
I love it. And, throughout this whole interview, it's just been wonderful to hear how intentional, again, you are in that the little moments. And you know what, just a funny insight that this came to me recently, when you practice being in the present and recognizing that right here, right now is an important part of your life, an important part of your calling, an important part of your destiny in Christ, if you want to say it that, every single moment. Honestly, as women, that's a huge help in the bedroom too. If you train your mind to be here and now. The day-to-day, it gets you to orgasm a lot quicker.
Yeah, it does, and it's funny too, because, I'll hear women say, this is kind of a funny thing too. People will be like, "Oh, I'm too tired," or I don't have time for sex. And I'm always like, "What?" I'm like, "What? How long does it really take?" I mean, even in my husband and I, even in like our best lovemaking sessions, it wasn't lasting hours. You can have some pretty incredible sex in 20 minutes. You really, you can, if you have the right heart attitude and stuff like that. And as far as the whole being too tired and, I think that sometimes it's just a matter of realigning our priorities. And I know stuff is busy with kids. My
Yeah.
older son, he plays baseball. And so we are heading into baseball season and we live, eat, breathe baseball.
Oh
And
gosh.
so
Yeah.
life gets messy and dinner at 8 o'clock is a, hot dog at the ball field and stuff like that. So I get that. But here's the thing is that when all is said and done, what your kids most need is they need a mama and daddy in love. That's what they most need.
Yes.
They don't need super clean floors and laundry that is always organized, and they don't need
Yeah.
perfectly homemade treats for their party at school, and they don't, store-bought treats would be fine, and they don't
Yeah.
always need a birthday party that took you months to plan. And, so you have to
Yes.
really, when you stand back and look at it, it's like, gosh, what does my spouse need? And what do my kids need? And you know what they need? They need a mama who's not completely freaked out. That's what they need. So
Amen.
amen to that. So I'm just like,
Mhm.
probably the people who are most stressed out are the ones who need sex the most. It's like, gosh, a
Yes.
good orgasm go a long
I
way to put
know.
things in perspective.
So true. It's so true. Thank you. Gosh, I wish we could just continue because this is just so good. And but see, this is the thing. You can continue the conversation at intimacyandmarriage.com. So
Absolutely.
Julie's got amazing articles there that you can dive into and hear more about extraordinary in the ordinary. It's just brilliant. So to follow up, can you share with us how we can connect with you online in all the different ways?
Absolutely. Well, you can connect with me obviously at my blog, which is intimacyandmarriage.com. And
Mm-hmm.
there's links to my social media stuff, but I will say my Twitter handle, which I do tweet, not only my own posts, but lots of other posts too. My Twitter handle is at intimacy and then the number 4 and then the word life. So Intimacy for Life is my Twitter handle. And then my Facebook page is Intimacy and Marriage. So, but you can find all that if you just go to intimacyandmarriage.com. That's where you'll find it all.
Awesome. Awesome. And again, we'll have that linked up in the show notes as well if you are driving or something and can't write it down. But Julie, this has just been brilliant. Thank you so much for being so open and
Well,
generous
thank
with
you.
your time.
I feel humbled and privileged that anybody would ever want to talk to me about about these things. So whenever I have the opportunity, and I just want to tell people, I'm just a normal person. I am. I'm as real gets, and I just have a heart for this area of marriage.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And you can tell because of that heart, she just has such great insights. Great, Julie. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Wow, I'm just so grateful for how much she was willing to give and the insights that she clearly has just overflowing. And go check out her website and check out her book and the other resources. It's all going to be linked up on the show notes. And while you're at delightyourmarriage.com, I would love for you also to click over to delightyourmarriage.com/webinar. And again, that is happening very, very soon. It's going to be on Tuesday, May 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, you're not going to want to miss it. It is totally anonymous. It's free and it's not recorded. So a number of people have reached out to me to find out if it will be recorded. And I don't, for the reason that it's private. You and I are having a private conversation about our intimacy in marriage. And it's a great event. Again, I've had so much awesome feedback and every single time it's a little different. So I've had people that have been on each webinar and they're like, I just love it. So praise God for that. Again, we're diving into the Bible. It's not scary. I promise you, we're not getting scary on there. But it's a great presentation. I really believe that God can use it to affect you in your marital intimacy. It's called How to Love Him Most. And go ahead to delightyourmarriage.com/webinar. It is coming up very soon. You also can get a free guide that you can find out more if you go to that website. Okay, God bless you, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Stop by delightyourmarriage.com to check out all the show notes, as well as many more resources and articles. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.